It's a dark day in Bucharest. The EBU has kicked Romania out of Eurovision 2016. Rumors have swirled for years that Romania would have to pull out of Eurovision, but somehow they have always made it to the show. But that changed today when the EBU announced that it can no longer tolerate the mounting debts from TVR, that's Television Romania. According to the EBU, Romania owes them 14.5 million euros. This dates back more than 10 years. Apparently, they've been sending letters out to Romania, asking them to respond, to set some kind of payment schedule, and they have not received a response. You guys, before we go into this and start pointing fingers and assigning blame, I just want to say we met Ovidiu twice in Tel Aviv, in Amsterdam, in London, make that 3 times, and he's such a lovely guy. He is so kind. I may not have been the biggest fan of his song initially. I always liked it, but I didn't necessarily love it. But he is such a nice person. He's not in this for fame. He's in this because he likes music. He loves to perform. And I'm really sad for him. I think that this is really quite cruel, actually, to just a few weeks before the show pull the rug out from under him. It really breaks my heart. Bogdan, you were in Romania. Dish.
I was at the national selection in Baia Mare, which was a huge production, and it's such a pity that so many artists invested so much effort and a lot of money in this, not to mention TVR and the city of Baia Mare, and then to have this now, I mean, it's really unfortunate and quite sad, I mean, especially for Ovidiu Anton in the first place.
I think it's very unfair on the part of both organizations of the EBU and TVR in Romania that they both obviously knew that this was coming down the line. The TVR knew they weren't paying their bills and the EBU knew that they weren't getting paid. And why they let it drag on so close to the actual event, and they've come down so heavy-handed on it that why couldn't they just let them participate this year? Next year be like, no, you're not coming.
A lot of people are placing the blame more on the EBU, but I think the blame lies, like 90% of it lies squarely with TVR, because they ought to have paid this debt. They are the institution who is in debt, you know. So they knew about this for a long time. I spoke last year with Liana Stanciu who was the head of the delegation last year, and she told me that the EBU had sent numerous letters to TVR and they got no reply. I mean, that is not the way to do, you know, when you have a debt. So, but of course, that on the other hand, pragmatically, the EBU is right, because they need to get back the money. But from a human standpoint, you have an artist who is not to blame and who is now out of the contest, even though he won fair and square, both with the jury and with the televotes. So yeah, I think that the blame is twofold, but TVR is more to blame in this regard. And the government is not to blame, I think, because this is a new government, 6 months old. The debt is so much older. And this government was only told about this a few days ago. And they didn't have the resources at the time and the legal means to provide a warranty for the EBU that TVR would first continue to exist and second pay its ridiculous debt.
And I just want to pause momentarily and read some comments from our readers. The first is from Miss Disco. She writes, if that debt has been building for years, why did they allow them to continue? What nonsense. This will leave a sour taste on the contest for many fans and probably the delegations of the smaller, poorer nations watching the bombastic production in Sweden. Paul D says, more shocking than Romania being forced to withdraw is that massive debt. 14 million? I think EBU should have done this before the preseason. Poor Ovidiu and Romanian fans, and Eurovision fans as well, as far as I'm concerned. ESCAU says, That's so unfair. The debt has been piling for years. It's not like they found out overnight. It's so unfair on Ovidiu to be disqualified days before the contest and after they've paid the participation fee and done a promotional tour. Hashtag moment of silence for Ovi and Romanian Euro fans. And you know what? Let's do one more while we're at it. This is from Darren. He says, "Aw, this is just terrible news. Could they not have just let Romania participate this year, then withdraw them next year? I mean, it's 2 weeks until Eurovision. They say that the EBU is not for profit, but it is clear that money talks in EBU land. Forcing Romania out, giving a privileged status to the biggest financial contributors, aka the Big Five, the participation of Australia, among other issues, I'm starting to dislike the EBU."
I suppose there's one thing that we have to bear in mind as well is that it's very unfair that Romania have been kicked out, but they've all this debt, and then there's the risk that they could have potentially won because everybody's entering the competition to win. And even though they're very low in the odds at the moment, they still have a chance that they could win Eurovision. And what are they meant to do if they did win? They're 14 million in debt. Could they expel them next year when they're the host? That wouldn't work either. And then stuff like Australia, people are saying that people should be making more of an effort to keep in the likes of Romania rather than bringing in Australia. But Australia are paying their bills. They're paying to be there. So you have to look at it from a lot of different perspectives.
It's very sad that in a year of coming together, you have one country who is being expelled with 11 days before the first rehearsals, not only from Eurovision, but also from the EBU. This is the first. Why couldn't they have done this like before, I don't know, in January, before the Selecția Națională took place, or after the contest? Because, yeah, Romania could have won, but some other country could have organized, hosted the contest. You know, it's happened before when Israel or other countries won and they couldn't host. So, yeah, I think that's where the unfair bit comes into place. And I think the EBU was very cold and pragmatic in this regard.
Do you think that the timing is part of the EBU strategy to get the money? For instance, might they say, we can embarrass Romania's broadcaster by doing this right before Eurovision, which will then force the government to cough up some of the money, or at least return our calls and letters, and then we'll let them back in. Is there hope for Ovidiu?
Unfortunately, no. The EBU has made this decision about Eurovision. What TVR could hope now, they are holding meetings now at the Ministry of Finance, is to get back in the EBU, but in the hope of broadcasting the Olympic Games from Rio. But that's not very likely either, because the government doesn't have the money and the legal means to pay these debts.
We should point out that Eurovision is not just Eurovision Song Contest. Eurovision is actually the world's biggest broadcaster of sporting events around the world. So this hits very hard, particularly given that sports draw in enormous ratings, even higher than Eurovision, I believe, Bogdan. Yeah.
Yes, exactly, yeah. Especially with the Olympic Games. Yeah, it's very sad. Also, it's also sad for the fans who are not well, maybe they are going to be able to watch on the internet, but they are not going to be able to vote for their favorite country. So it's quite sad. It's a sad day for the Eurovision fans in Romania.
And the outpouring of support is not just from fans, it's also from fellow contestants who have met the lovely Ovidiu on the promotional tour. Sergei Lazarev on Instagram posted this photo with the caption, "When all things that have nothing to do with music affect an artist, there is only one thing I can say, unfair. I believe that the least that can be done now is to invite Ovidiu Anton to perform as a guest during the final of Eurovision out of respect for all his efforts." Amir writes, "My dear Ovidiu Anton, you'll be strongly missed this year at the Eurovision. At least my half-Romanian wife will be there to replace you." And Pali Janova says, "Sad to learn that Romania will not take part in the Eurovision. Ovidiu Anton, you're a great singer and performer. Strength and kisses." Porig, do you think Romania should be allowed to perform in some capacity in the grand final?
I think it would be very nice that he could have a kind of Anna Book moment, that she was disqualified from Melfest, but yet she was let perform in her semi-final and she came back to all this glory and the adoring fans. But that's a very different event. It's so localized, whereas Eurovision is so global. Everyone is up in arms right now in the Eurovision kind of fan community, being like, oh, poor Romania. But 90% of the viewers won't have really clocked this, and they'll be like, why is this man performing from Romania and we can't vote for him? What's going on? So I definitely don't think he'd get in the grand final. Maybe if SVT are being very generous, he'll get to perform in the semi-final. I don't know, but it would be nice even if he was just able to come to Euroclub or the after party thing in the Tele2 arena, that he could kind of have his moment then.
Ovidiu, you can come to the Wee Wee Jam May 11th, Hard Rock Cafe, Stockholm, 7 to 10:30. You are there. We are gonna put you on the bill. Bogdan.
Yeah, I agree that it would be very nice if Ovidiu could perform as, I don't know, an interval act or something, his Anna Book moment. But on the other hand, I think, it's not very likely because the EBU is effectively cutting all the ties with TVR, and TVR wouldn't be able to broadcast or even report about it. I think the only positive from this is that Ovidiu's face is all over the news internationally, globally, and people are probably going to listen to his song, and he's going to be famous because of this. Maybe even more famous if he had performed at the Eurovision. So I think that's the only light that I can see for him at this on this very dark day.
Speaking of dark moments, we've got to share this footage from the London Eurovision party. We interviewed him on Sunday as the rumors started spreading that TVR might have to pull out or be forced out, and he said that he hoped he would not be so unlucky to lose his chance at Eurovision. And watching this now, it's just heartbreaking. Roll that footage. And so we are likely to see you in Stockholm.
I have to say, I don't think I'm that unlucky to be happening this year and to me. After all I've done and tried to win this, I don't think I'm that unlucky dude. I think it's not my fault, and I think I don't deserve that.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to be on stage in Stockholm and prove everyone I'm right.
You guys, can we just have a moment of silence for Ovidiu?